Yogena chittasya padena vacham malam sharirascha vaidagena yopakrottam pravaram muninam Patanjalim pranjaliranatosmi stuve Patanjalim vyasam Shankaram cha munitrayam katra sutrasya bhashisya kramat vivaranasya cha. So we are continuing the discussion on this most important part of Ashtanga Yoga, it's known as Pratyahara. It is one of the most important elements of this Ashtanga, because these 8 limbs, Ashtangas, are divided into 2 fundamental categories. One set of 5 limbs, the first one, yama, niyama, asana, pranayama, together are called bahirangas. So the first 5 limbs are called bahirangas, which are somewhat external in nature. Yama, niyama, asana, pranayama, and pratyahara. We already discussed elaborately all this. It's called bahirangas, external. The other 3 together are called samyama, dharana, dhyana, and samadhi. So we already had 2 sessions on pratyahara, the 5th of the bahirangas. The reason is pratyahara is what enables you to advance to the 6th, 7th, and finally to the 8th anga. That means if a person gets established in Pratyahara, that means natural withdrawal of all the senses from external objects and internalizing all of them by sublimating the natural tendencies of the 5 senses of perception and 5 senses of action towards a higher internal focus, which enables you to fight the challenges of vrittis, vasanas, samskaras from previous life. I shall try to explain this. So we already read a few of the important definitions of Pratyahara according to Vyasa, according to Ramananda Saraswati, and according to many Bhava Ganesha and others we already discussed. So we just repeat some of those ideas to make this point more clear. So Ramananda Saraswati, he wrote this famous Tika Maniprabha, where he says, Chittasya Sarupanukaraha Indriyani Vishayebhya Pridilomena Arhiyende Asmin Idi Pratyahara. That means the process, this particular process by which the sense organs are made to move in the opposite direction. Opposite direction means not towards external objects. The senses normally are oriented towards external objects. See, we can have 2 functions for the eyes. The natural function is when the eyes move towards a visual object. So the visual object and the eyes, they come together, and then mind also is involved in the process. Then you cognize the visual object. The ears normally, naturally flow outward towards the place of the object from where a sound or speech or voice is coming. And then when mind also is involved in the process, cognition takes place, then the mind recognizes the particular object from where this sound is coming. Now, this should be turned in the opposite direction. That's why that is called, pratilomena, vishebhya pratilomena, means in the opposite direction from external objects, which means the senses are turned inward. Inward towards what? Not towards Atman, towards mind. So when the senses are not flowing in the external direction towards sense objects, then they need a focus to move towards. And that focus is mind. So the natural process by which the senses, eyes, ears, etc., the senses of perception, instead of moving towards the natural external objects, start moving in the opposite direction, then we achieve Pratyahara. When this Pratyahara becomes fully established, when we become fully established in Pratyahara, then a kind of preliminary concentration is achieved, which is called Dharana. So there are two types of Dharanas that we have to keep in mind. One Dharana which is preliminary, which Vyasa refers to. That Dharana is the natural focus for the senses, where the senses get focused on the internal system, mind itself, when they are moving away from their external objects in the external world. This is also some kind of a dharana. So sometimes it is called bhavana in the commentary literature. Some commentators say this is not dharana. The real dharana comes at the sixth stage, that means beyond and after Pratyahara. But some kind of dharana in the sense of contemplation is achieved even at the level of Pratyahara, because without a focus, you cannot really withdraw the senses from external objects. The senses need a focus. The natural focus are in the external world, as eyes have their focus on a visual object. Ears have a focus on an audio object. And our sense of touch naturally gets focused on what we touch. The sense of smell gets focused on the place or from where the perfume is coming. So all external. So they need a focus. And so that's the main problem. Mostly it is these external focuses that creates problem. So the first step is we have to provide an alternate focus to the senses. And what is that focus? Mind itself. So the senses are turned towards mind. And then we achieve some kind of concentration. Of course, it's not a highest concentration. Some kind of a bhavana, that's a Sanskrit term they use. It's in the contemplative stage, when the mind provides an alternate focus to the senses. So that's why Vyasa says, Svishaya prayoga bhave chitta surupānukāraha ivaiti chitta nirodhe chittavat niruddhāni indriyāni na idrendriya jevat upayantram apekshanti. So what happens? These indriyas, when they are naturally turned inward, then they won't care for any other external objects. Then what happens? They follow the mind. So the example is given, mind is like the queen bee. So the imagery is very significant. Yatha madhukara rajyam makshiga utpadandam anutpadanti nivishamanam anunivashanti tatha indriyani chitta nirodhe niruddhani ityesha pratyahara. So what happens? The mind which has suspended its functions naturally becomes the focus for the senses. So we have to explain this mind suspending its functions. What's the meaning of mind suspending its functions? Mind becomes functional, mind becomes hyperactive only when the mind is assisted by the five senses of perception. Otherwise the mind, its function is only internal, memory, concentration, etc. At a subtle level. We may be seeing things, but they're using the eyes, internal seeing. We may be hearing without using the external ear as a senses of perception. We may be hearing internally. So when these senses are turned inward, then what happens? The senses have no contact with the corresponding external objects. Then what happens? The mind has suspended its functions at the external level. So this is called Pratyahara. From this, Dharana automatically follows. Dharana is the first stage in the Samyama, which is called concentration. So another commentator also throws some light on this idea. Indriyanam svavishaya asannigashagale dhyanadu chittakarada bhavanti sapratyakara. This is another, Nagoji Bhatta is another commentator. So he says, so what happens in Pratyahara? When the senses become one with the mind, when the senses are not connected to the external sensory objects, then they need to be connected to something. So the senses look forward some focus, and the focus is the mind. So the mind is no more functional in the external sense of the term. Mind is functional through maybe in the form of memory, in the form of contemplation, as we saw in the bhavana. But the mind is no more externally engaged. So some commentators say that this is the stage where we had to confront the challenges of past samskaras and vrittis. So when a person is fully established in Pratyahara, mind is no more flowing towards external objects. Mind is suspended all its external functions. Then naturally, the accumulated tendencies and vrittis and vasanas, which are already lying in different layers of the mental system called chittam, they come to the surface. So some commentator would say, at this stage, a yogi may have to face the challenges of vrittis, vasanas, samskaras and impressions that may come from previous life. That's why some spiritual seekers, when they reach a particular stage, which is technically called in the Christian theological mystical tradition called a dark night of the soul. You feel you have reached a dead end. You don't know where to go. You reach a stage where it is not misery as we understand in the ordinary sense of the term. You feel a kind of helplessness. But that helplessness is different from the feeling of being wretched, It's a poor man out of poverty struggling for wealth. A greedy man struggling to make more profits. Or a selfish man trying to achieve many things. Or a mischievous person looking for some mischief. This is one particular stand. There are some people who cannot keep quiet. They have to do some mischief somewhere. So some criminals are there, in some prisons, there are some criminals, they go mad if they don't get a chance to do some mischief. So they make some arrangement for them to do some little mischief, which they find, and then they get all right. So many of these tendencies may come to the surface. So, all these are connected with some kind of total wretchedness. But what we call the dark night of the soul, which is a kind of spiritual discontentment, is different from this. Because if you are a spiritual seeker, then there is a joy even in spiritual discontentment. There is a joy. You feel dissatisfied because you are not making enough progress in spiritual life. You feel a kind of internal helplessness because you feel you are not getting full concentration in meditation, in prayer. In all these activities, you feel disturbed. That feeling is different from the feeling of a greedy man for wealth and money. So that should be understood, the differences. That's why a yogi, when he reaches the pranayama and pratyahara stage, he gets something, he accumulates something, a kind of fuel, a kind of internal joy, fulfillment. But he may also have to face problems coming from past life and past memories. This is sometimes interpreted in the Christian tradition as the temptations of the devil or the Satan and things like that. But Patanjali says all these disturbances, obstacles may be coming from some source. That source may not be this life. If you feel you have a strong obsession or an emotion, it should have a root. It has a root cause. If you cannot trace its cause to some of our experiences in this life, then you have to go beyond that. It could be from previous life. So, at this stage, when the mind is no more flowing towards external objects, when the senses are already turned inward, pradilomena as Vyasa says, when the senses start moving in the opposite direction from the natural objects, external objects, then what happens? The mind suddenly appears to create problems, which means problems in the sense some obstacles which we are not aware of earlier come to the surface. So at that stage, one need a focus. So according to some yoga philosophers, Ishvara Pranidhana is a great help at this stage. That's why Ishvara Pranidhana Dva. So Va means Vikalpa. Otherwise, if we cannot fully get established in Yama and Niyama or Pranayama, still, if you had a great faith in God or a great belief in a great sublime ideal, then what happens? That ideal becomes the focus. So many of the problems can be averted or can be solved. So Ishvara Pranidhana Dva has got a special relevance when a person is struggling to get fully established in Pratyahara. As I said, when a mind is flowing towards external objects, you don't experience problems because the mind is engaged. The mind is busy with external visual objects, audio objects, all these things, wonderful things, the external world, occupy the mental energy, mind's activities. So no problem. If you're watching a big movie, you can forget all problems. But that's not going beyond problems, it's only postponing the problems. Or for the time being, forgetting the problem. It's not solution. You don't go beyond the problems. But once the senses start getting focused towards mind itself, then many of these internal vrittis, vasana, samskaras come to the surface. But once we get fully established in Pratyahara, these problems will vanish. And then we graduate the next stage, that is Dharana. So that's why the next sutra says, Tataha Parama Vashyata Indriyanam. That's it. Tata Parama Vashyata Indriyanam. So the prose order will be Tataha Indriyanam Parama Vashyata. From this Pratyahara, we get the highest control of these sense organs. That means when we get fully established in Pratyahara. So one of the most visible external signs of being established in Pratyahara is that we are able to let go of all accumulated tensions, feel a complete internal peace, relaxation, body and mind, everything, and also our awareness our consciousness of things around gets highly expanded. Means the first point is we become aware of certain things that we were not aware of before we undertook this yogic path. Many of the spiritual problems and their solutions become obvious to us. We may not need any external help. That is why Sri Ramakrishna makes a simple statement. At one stage, mind itself becomes our guide in spiritual life. So that needs a lot of explanation. A normal mind is certainly not a guide, not a very reliable guide. Because the mind, when focused on external objects, not only is not a good guide, but is a very bad guide. Mostly misguides us. When the eyes are focused on external visual things, the mind develops a desire for those things. So, the dhyayato vishayan pumsaha sangastesh upajayate sangar samjayate kamaha kama krodho vijayate krodhat bhavati sammoha sammoha smriti vibhrama smriti bhramshat buddhinashat pranasyati. You find this in the second chapter of the Gita, the explanation of the characteristics of a sthita prajna, fully spiritually enlightened person. The way our mind loses its track, the way we mentally degrade ourselves is given in a very graphic language. So first we go on contemplating on different objects. So Vishaya could be any object. It could be an object that we could see and mind flows towards that. Hear and mind goes towards that. Maybe bad music or bad visual objects or smells that could create bad impressions in the mind. Anything, bad things that we touch, bad things that we eat, taste, any of these things. All these can create a desire in the mind. The sangaha teshu upajayate. So what happens? A person whose mind is normally focused on external objects, the natural tendency of the senses. Then what happens? We develop a strong desire to possess them. And then when we do not succeed in possessing them, then we get disappointed, we lose our temper, and slowly mental degradation takes place. So this is what happens when mind is dragged by the five senses of perception towards various external objects. So that's why Vyasa emphatically says, sorry, not Vyasa, of course, this is from Maniprabha, which is a commentary by Ramananda Saraswati. He says, Indriyani vishayebhya pradilomena arhiyante asmin iti pratyahara. The process, the discipline, the method by which the sense organs are made to move in the opposite direction from their sense objects, which is called pratyahara. So what happens when the senses are engaged, connected to external objects? Mind apparently doesn't create any problem because we are not even started our spiritual life, no problem. But through spiritual practice, yogic practice, when you try to direct the movement of the senses away from the sense objects and towards mind, then during the process of practicing and developing pratyahara, trying to practice pratyahara, there will be problems. But once you get established in pratyahara, then what happens? That mind itself becomes a great guide, great help. That mind takes us in the correct direction. So that is an interesting thing. So mind itself becoming a guru means mind of a spiritual seeker who is fully established in pratyahara. And what is pratyahara? Indriyanam paramavasyata. complete control, the highest control of sense organs, where sense organs no more drag the mind towards external things. That complete control is the characteristic of the highest Pratyahara. Then the mind itself becomes a very helpful, very intelligent guide in our spiritual life. As I said earlier, one important sign of a person, a seeker, who is fully established in Pratyahara is he be in a state of absolute peace and tranquility. It is not inactivity or insensitivity. Rather, going beyond pain and pleasure, he has no pain, not because he has plenty of pleasure. He has no pain because he has transcended both pain and pleasure. Dukkeshu anudiktamana, sukheshu vigataspraha. He is not affected by either pain or pleasure. Because you can never have a pain-free life so long as we are seeking pleasure. So the only way to go beyond pain is to stop seeking pleasure. So that concludes the sadhana pada. That is the 55th sutra of sadhana pada, means on practices, which I mentioned earlier, sadhana pada in terms of practical yoga, actual practical yoga, maybe sadhana pada is what we should begin with, and then we go into vibhuti pada, and then samadhi, then kaivalya. So now we will deal with the vibhuti pada, which in the printed book may come as a third chapter. So, but as I mentioned, we already discussed the first 14 or 15 sutras of samadhi pada, because those sutras contain the definitions, and those sutras introduce the basic concepts of yoga, cittavritti, nirodha, all these. So we already finished that. So now we are familiar with those definitions. So keeping that in mind, we will proceed to the next chapter, Vibhuti Pada. So here Dharana is defined. As I mentioned, the Dharana, Dhyana and Samadhi are together called Samyama. And the first 5 disciplines, that is Yama, Niyama, Asana, Pranayama and Pratyahara, are called Bahirangas, that we have already completed. So this is a definition. Now, this is a definition here. Desha Bandhas Chittasya Dharana. So, what is Dharana? Desha Bandha. So, what is Dharana is our mind's fixation on a particular point in space. So, Desha Bandha means you focus the mind on one particular point to the exclusion of everything else. So, all other areas are completely blocked. The mind is fixed exclusively on one particular point. That is Dharana. So, of course, we had, as I mentioned earlier, when we practice pranayama, when we practice pratyahara on both occasions, we do some kind of dharana. So that dharana is only, in a way, providing a counter focus to the senses, so that the senses, instead of flowing towards external objects, the phenomenal world, are directed internally towards mind. So that dharana is only a kind of contemplative practice. So technically that is also some kind of a preliminary dharana. But this dharana is different. So that's why Vyasa describes dharana as external and internal dharanas, two types of dharanas. Now we have to discuss these words used here. Deshabandhaha chittasya dharana. So desha here means, according to some commentators like Yoga Sudhakara, means adharadi desha, means any kind of various centers of the chakras in the body. So bandha means sthirikaranam, means fixing on one particular point, excluding all other points. Now, as I mentioned here, focusing on different external things. Here, Vyasa gives a very important description, because many of the exact traditional interpretation will be clear only in the light of the original text. And after reading the traditional texts and commentaries, we will think of what it could mean or what implication it could have to our times. So that's the process. So Vyasa says, Napi chakre hridaya pundarike murdhini jyodishi nasikagre jihvagre ittevamadishu deseshu bahyeva vishaye chittasya vrittimatrena bandha idi dharana. So Vyasa gives a very elaborate description of what dharana is. So we should know in what way the traditional commentaries or commentators could be connected to our times. The language, the technical vocabulary used in the traditional Sanskrit commentaries frequently are related to either Sankhya philosophy or, to a lesser extent, yoga system. So many of those ideas may not be clearly obvious to us. But as I mentioned earlier, by reading Vyasa's commentary, when we read Vyasa's commentary and when we interpret in modern language, you find that Vyasa's commentaries, the commentaries of Ramananda Saraswati, Nagaji and others, or even Shankaracharya's, Bhashi Vivarana, all these have got a very, very rare psychological implications to our times. So, for example, Vyasa says, Dharana, what is Dharana? Dharana means holding or fixing the mind on the navel circle. That's called Nabhi Chakra. Or on the lotus of the heart, Hridaya Pundarika. Now just imagine. These are some of the chakras. So you mentioned in the Tantra tradition also. The Tantric tradition also, these are the areas in which one is supposed to meditate, one is supposed to concentrate on the mind, to evolve, to reach higher levels of consciousness. In actual practice, our understanding, our sense of what we actually are, beyond this physical body, which is after a perishable thing, or this mind which is subject to changes. Beyond this body and mind, we have a higher spiritual dimension. We are the all-pervading consciousness. So this idea is the goal. But to reach this goal, we have to start from where we stand. And most of the human beings interpret themselves as these physical bodies. And when you interpret yourself as the physical body, then there are certain areas of the human body mechanism in which the mind naturally gets focused. So that process can be given a spiritual direction, so that our sense of what we are, sense of consciousness, gets a gradual uplifting. So that's what happens. So Dharana is described here. After this I shall try to explain in modern language. So, Dharana means holding or fixing the mind on the Nabhi Chakra means the navel circle, or Hridaya Puntarika means the lotus of the heart. There is no lotus inside the heart. But when we assert, I believe in it, you don't put your head on the head and say, I believe. You put your head somewhere close to the chest. So if people, of course, when some terrible calamities take place in some countries, they weep and cry, they beat their chest, they don't beat their head. Oh, when you assert yourself, I say, I want to do. You mean, if at all you use body language, where do you place your palm, your hand? Not on your head or a shoulder, but to a place which is close to the heart. So that is called Hridaya Puntarika. Hridaya itself in Sanskrit, in the Chandogya Upanishad, Bhashya Shankaracharya is Hridi Ayam Iti Purusha Hridaya. So Purusha means the spiritual divine principle that is present in all of us, the immanent spiritual truth. It remains within, where in a head, heart, body, wherever it is, when we try to meditate, on some divine principle, we start that meditative process as the divine being present in our heart. That's why we get lotus. Lotus is a wonderful place for the divine reality to sit. So this imagery used in the devotional philosophy and also in the tantric tradition, and also frequently mentioned in even the Shankaracharya's commentaries, whenever there is a discussion on these subjects, is very profound in its implication. So that is why concentration or focusing or holding or fixing the mind on the navel circle, because that's where people start ascending towards a higher level of consciousness. From body to his mind, the intellect, and so on. Or the Hridaya Pundarika means the lotus of the heart. Or on the effulgent center, it means Murdhini. Jyotishi, Murdhini means the center, Murdha of the head. And that Murdha is explained with an adjective. It is called Jyotishi Murdhini. Or Jihvagra, on the tip of the nose. That is related to meditation. I shall try to explain that. Or of the tongue. Jihvagre, on the tip of the tongue. That means Nasikagre means on the tip of the nose. Jihvagre means on the tip of the tongue. Itevam adishu deseshu bhaheva vishaye chittasya vrittimatrena bandhaidi dharana. So you can imagine what a grand description of the evolution of consciousness from the lowest biological aspect of the human body mechanism to the highest spiritual dimension of the personality. So it is mentioned here, so Murdhini, Jyotishi, Nasikagre, then the tip of the nose, which is often used for meditation. So so Tattaivagram Manakrutva, so in the Gita there is so there is an important verse where Lord Krishna says you should sit. Literally, the verse could mean looking at the tip of the nose. But Shankaracharya, who is considered to be the incarnation of Lord Shiva himself, explains its spiritual significance. If you sit meditating and looking at the tip of the nose, your tip of the nose will be the focus of your concentration. So the all-pervading supreme reality itself will manifest as a big nose. So what's the purpose of this statement? So you should not be looking at the tip of the nose, rather as if you are looking at the tip of the nose. You cannot meditate with open eyes. Then eyes will bring to your mind visual images. So you will be focusing on what you see in front of you. You cannot close your eyes if you are a beginner in spiritual life. Then if you try to meditate with eyes completely closed, then you will see only total darkness. And not only that, one practical suggestion is you may go to sleep. So Shankaracharya says, you should not be looking at the tip of the nose. You should be sitting as if you are looking at the tip of the nose. Which technically means you should be sitting straight with the sushumna in back of the body, the neck and head in straight position. And you should not close your eyes completely, because then you will go to sleep or you'll see darkness. You'll be focusing on darkness, especially for a beginner. Advanced spiritual seekers can completely close their eyes and still meditate on the effulgent reality. But if you look at the focus literally at the tip of the nose, then you will be meditating on the tip of the nose. So you should not be completely closing your eyes, and eyes should not be completely open. So that idea is indicated here. This Nasikagre means here. One should not fix attention on the Nasikagre, tip of the nose. One should be sitting with eyes neither completely closed not wide open. If the eyes are completely closed, then darkness internally will and sleep. And the eyes are wide open, then the visual objects will be the focus for meditation, which is also not the right thing. So that's the meaning of Nasikagre Jikhvagre. Ityevamadishu deseshu baheva vishaye chittasya vrittimatrena bendhaidi dharana. So what dharana is, that is the sixth of the Ashtangas, yama, niyama, asana, pranayama, pratyahara, dharana. Dharana means holding, fixing the mind on the navel circle, or lotus of the heart, or the center of the head, which is effulgent, or the tip of the nose, or of the tongue, or on such spots in the body, any of these, or any external objects by means of modifications of the mind. Of course, there is a gradual evolution from fixing on external objects towards the next stage of fixing the internal objects. So that should be understood. But the main difference is this. As I mentioned earlier, this is the beginning of real concentration, that is beginning of samyama. So in the case of meditating or fixing on internal regions, the mind is directly fixed through feeling, immediate feeling, internal. For example, you try to mentally through willpower, try to fix the mind, say for example, Hridaya Pundari on the heart, the Lord sitting, or some effulgent reality as the inner resident in our heart, etc. Now that dharana will be so fully concentrated that you won't be aware of anything else. All the five senses have suspended their functions because you are fully established in Pratyahara. So mind is completely focused on the particular region on which you are trying to concentrate. But in the case of external objects, fixing on external objects, this is done only through modification of the senses. Means we try to put some object in front of us and try to visualize through imagery, slowly try to fix the mind completely on that object, to the exclusion that for us only that particular object exists and nothing else exists. Because one is fully established in Pratyahara, senses are completely withdrawn from all the natural external objects. So the senses are practically non-functional and the mind is calm. So that mind is fixed on this particular object on which you are concentrating. So this is the method. Of course, we will continue the discussion in the next session. Now we can have interaction. We can say. Some of these discussions, the topics become clear only gradually when the discussion unfolds itself, when we go into more details, what we already discussed earlier become more obvious, more clear. Yes.
So, Swamiji, in the last few classes we discussed concepts of Pratyahara and Dharana, this class. On paper at least, in the text, it sounds, a lot to do with